This conference is now being recorded.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the New York ASBO webinar, Service Level Evaluation. My name is Matthew Darius. I'm the Senior Staff Associate for Professional Development here at ASBO, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Your presenter for today's program is Stephen Van Hoosen, Director of Government Relations and Professional Development here at New York ASBO. Operator assistance is available anytime during this conference by pressing £. Questions may be asked at any time by pressing £7 on your phone. A Q&A session will follow this presentation, and you may send chat questions at any time during the presentation using the chat window indicated by a speech bubble icon located to the right of the presentation. Now I'll turn the call over to our speaker. Steve, please begin.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. And we have three people here on the line. You should be able to look at that when you look at the participants on your own screen. Well, we have Michelle Matisse and Richard Thompson. I think they're the only ones. And Patricia Shaw. I'm sorry, on our line today. And this is actually the first of the series in operations for school districts. And what I wanted to do here, and once we recognized we had such a small turnout, is to really focus on some of the issues that are probably affecting what you're trying to do with your budgets right now, and looking at what building aid is going to look like for each one of your school districts. And that has been a subject of conversation that we've had with the legislature, with the governor's office, and with the Board of Regents over the past several months. And it's just something that I wanted to go through and run through how it would affect districts based on the current proposal, what our position is on this, and also what we're expecting to see momentarily from both the legislature and the governor's office as they begin negotiations talking about the school budget. So what I'm hoping is, as I go through a few of the slides here, that we can engage in conversation about some of the aspects that are going to affect things that may impact your district, because I know that the proposals are something that is very concerning based on district credibility and the ability for the district to begin conversations with their publics and pursue what they've already talked about and going forward. So what I would like to do, I just want to talk about the future of school building aid for the moment, and just want to go through what the governor's already proposed. And looking at the first slide that you're on, the governor's proposed for 2011-12, and it went beyond impact on school districts in it went for two significant ways. It went beyond it for some other ways, but the ways I want to talk about it is the first part of this proposal would declare all building aid proposals not approved prior to February 1st ineligible for the incentives that districts have been able to use for calculating building aid for many years. And it's one of the things that the State Education Department has been working with districts and to figure out, okay, what's your best ratio going back, and what they would be doing is looking at what is comparable to the foundation aid formula, and that's it for building aid proposals that were approved by the voters as of February 1st. The political logic to that was that they would not allow for a mad rush of proposals to come into the State Education Department and then blow up kind of what their numbers had been, and to basically limit what districts would be allowed to do going forward with current projects. That's the number one. The number two is that going forward into July is that any district that was putting plans and specs before the Education Department and requesting at that point that would generate the request for school building aid would then be put into a priority pool of basically a triage in respect to what districts would qualify for building aid, what wouldn't. So there's kind of a two-step approach here. One would be immediate elimination of the incentives and the building aid ratios that would benefit that particular district. The second part would be then to then put districts into a priority pool and rank them, and then only aid those projects up to a certain level, and this would be on a quarterly basis according to the governor's proposal. And then it would go from district to district how SED and facilities planning decided that those proposals were important enough to generate aid. And that is one of the things, that is probably the most concerning to us. There's two things. One is the date, the February 1st date for eliminating the aid part of it, and the second would be the proposal for the triage process and the competitive process that districts would be under. So going forward, this is the actual listing of what the law said that districts that didn't have that were thrown into the priority pool, the triage process, how they would be ranked according to what the legislature felt was the priorities for school districts. So the total funding would be limited, and this is the number that they would provide, $2 billion on aidable costs per year. And projects that have received total local approval would be prioritized based on this ranking, and they'd be classified once they were received by the Education Department. And you can look through this, and it would show that in the first tier that projects that affected health and safety would be approved first. Second would be the overcrowding issue for school districts. The third would be projects that would replace and renovate buildings for use of more than 40 years. So there's an age capacity there for the number 3. And number 4, to projects that would modernize or renovate projects that have been used for at least 20 years. So the 3 and 4 are kind of connected. And number 5 is projects that add capacity or extend the building useful life by at least 15 years. And then number 6, other projects. So what the proposal actually is doing for those districts that would be approving projects after July, they would have to they would go into this priority pool, and they would be subjected to the whims of the State Education Department providing recommendations for funding to the Division of Budget. And there are a significant number of issues that are related to this, and as I move a little bit forward, talking about the problems with this proposal. We have been contacted by a number of districts, and I'm not sure whether the 3 of you that are participating with us today fall into this category or not, that have projects that they're planning to vote on sometime between February 1st and July. And in that case, that whatever they put out to their voters, specifically in terms of what the local tax impact is going to be, is not reflective of what possibly would happen under what's being proposed by the governor's proposal. And that's one of the biggest concerns and the problems with the proposal as we see it, and the things that I think most of the education associations, including New York State ASBO, have been providing to the Education Department and to the majority staffs in the legislature. So going to that first slide, that first bullet here is districts planning to go to voters prior to July 1st. It's a matter of public trust and integrity. And the biggest thing that we see, I mean, we've been hit, as you may well know, over the course of time with retro programs on building aid and having to go with assumed amortization schedules that that impact local taxpayers, but also require a lot of work on the part of the administration to have done that refinancing piece of it to make the debt schedule match what the aid schedule looks like. Right now, what we're looking at is that if you've gone out with a proposal and you're looking to get a budget passed on a building project, that you have a public trust issue, because what you've said to your voters may not be, in fact, what is ultimately could be what's in the law and what you would actually get aided on within that given project. Number two goes to the issue, the loss of local control here goes to the idea of the competitive process and the triage. The state would determine what projects would be aided and what wouldn't be. This has been a point of contention for school districts and New York State for a number of years. When the number of projects were building up after they passed the 10% incentive aid, along with the which still in current law until they pass a new budget that includes it, would allow for aid ratios to be going back into the 80s for some of the reimbursement parts of this, is one of the things that has been discussed and debated over time. And where we are now, and we're talking about this loss of local control, really deals mostly with the ability of a district to fund their projects and have certain numbers that they can take forward to their voting public and provide a capital project that makes sense and is not something that the Education Department has been concerned about over a number of years, which has been those districts that had used the 10%, which to double buy or buy more than they could have bought based on the state's dime, as opposed to what they would had to spend for that same project on the local taxpayer. So one of the big issues that the state has been having is to fund projects which helped fairly wealthy districts that didn't have problems passing bond issues and built supreme facilities throughout the state, particularly in those wealthy areas and the suburban areas, but did not hit the districts that needed the capital project the most, and that have the districts that are crumbling and that are not even looking at turf fields and other things that some districts were able to buy through incidental costs through the incentive and some of the changes that are going place. So one of the biggest concerns about this proposal is that if all this is turned over to the State Education Department, that there would be a loss of local control for districts to be able to determine what projects they felt were important, and basically go ahead with the voters with a number that they could trust, and do what they needed to do for their local students. The third piece of this is, and the problem with this, is the inability of SED to manage the system. And we see that, and we've had many conversations with the Education Department about what the state budget proposal is going to do to them, and we got reconfirmation this weekend that they're going to be looking to cut 10% out of management services across the board, and that's going to affect not necessarily relieving people from their duties within management services, but it's not going to be able to replace at least two of the architects and one engineer that are in the department right now that are planning for their retirement. And we do know that one of the concerns that the Education Department has expressed to the legislature on this whole building aid proposal by the governor is that they don't have the capacity, nor the inclination, frankly, to be in the position to create this triage system and decide which projects are going forward and which shouldn't be going forward based on this quarterly process. One of the things that we were told, however, and this has actually helped the lobbying effort that we have here, is that the $200 billion that is in the state budget is about what the Education Department has expected to receive in terms of projects going forward for next year. So they're kind of confounded, and that means that we're kind of confounded, is the fact that why then, if it's not a money issue for the state, why a triage process is necessary going forward. So that's one of the things that they've explained, and they've also explained that they don't have the capacity nor the inclination to basically be the arbiter of what building projects would or would not be approved. They're very concerned, as we are, that there would be a building project that would be approved by the voters based on current numbers that got put into the hopper for this competitive process on one level, and then throughout that subsequent quarter, or that they were leapfrogged by another project that came in that had something that qualified under a priority 1, and they got moved down. And as we all know, that any time a delay in capital projects occurs, then that's basically increased costs. So what we're concerned about in that local control piece, the one above what I was talking about, the management system with SED, is that if they aren't able to, if they're required to judge which projects are more important than others and take that away from the voters, then they would then be increasing the cost for some projects and decreasing the cost from others based on the process that they put in place. And this is something that had been proposed in previous administrations. I think Pataki had this piece in there at some point. It wasn't called priority rankings. It was called something else. But this is one of the things that has been opposed by most of the associations that deal with or understand the way capital finance works. And it also has been opposed by the SED, and because they can't, within their staff, manage the system. So we've got a number of problems that have been exposed about what's going on with the future of building aid. And then we move to the legislative reaction to this. The out-year proposals to limit building aid have mostly been unsuccessful, and that's kind of related to what I had said a few moments ago. Is we saw this under the Pataki administration was right after, in the late 90s, when the 10% building aid was put in there as a mechanism to try to spur those districts who had real significant types of capital finance and capital projects that needed to be done. It didn't work. That it was recognized that there were districts that, like I said, had looked at the 10% incentive as something that they could, instead of cut back on their spending on their proposals, they actually bought more with the money that was available to them based on the 10%. And so what we had was an increase of the have and have-nots with regard to school facilities. And that's been something that has been recognized in the out-year proposals that have been proposed. The number 2, determinations that out-year proposals will not save money, just increase delays and increase costs for local districts. I think that is related to what my comment before, is that if the state is determining which beyond their normal process for school facilities, that they would end up having to make these determinations about what programs or what proposals that were submitted to them in plans and specs got approved, and that they would be in the position to create a leapfrogging process where a proposal that came in said, oh, well, no, suddenly we have an emergency that is a priority 1, and that leapfrogs somebody that's in priority 2 that had already established that their need and had put that stuff out to the voters, would increase actual cost to the states over time if they were pushed back onto the from year to year, and their construction costs and their incidental costs would go up, and it would be something that would also, going back to another comment that I made, would increase the distrust among the local, the school district and their constituents, because, well, we told you this. Here's what we thought it would cost you. Here's what it would cost the state. Here's the proposal. Well, now we didn't get approved, so now we're going to have to wait. And, well, by the way, it's going to cost you more money because the cost of the contract is going up. So it is going to. That's one of the reasons why this local control and that the legislature has had this reaction, and we're actually been pleased they've understood this. And number 3 is the perspective on out-year reductions to expense-based aids have been eliminated in previous years. Related to number 1, like I said, we've seen this going back to Pataki, and they have never passed muster as far as the arguments against them. The difference that we have now is that the governor has made his case that he does not want to just pass a budget that has 1 year, or he affects all statutory laws in New York State in a 1-year process. He wants to create this, what he's called a sham in the state budget, by eliminating the fact that there is out-year growth in the budget and that it's discussed as a matter of routine that we have these deficits every year. After that comment was made, there was a lot of infighting among legislators and the governor's staff about the genuineness of that comment, and we have seen that recently that there is an understanding that to change that budgeting process to, in a 1-year process, eliminate out-year growth in aid formulas is a disequitable process, and it's a process that eliminates school district trust with the constituency, unless it's done in a way that really fosters an understanding of what's happening on all sides of the aisle. And that's when we see these radio ads and we see press releases, that hasn't happened so far. So that's the reaction. The next steps that we expect to see in the legislature, we have big bills of over 400 pages right now that have been submitted to the legislature within the Senate and within the Assembly that have modified the law and have, which is the first step and basically is a constitutional step that the state has to take in providing for a negotiation base for where the Assembly and where the Senate wants to negotiate with the governor. So we saw those come out over the weekend. Our efforts to find out summaries and specifics on those things have been difficult throughout today, but we expect to be able to provide summaries on some things, or basically on all things related to the state budget tomorrow. But in our prep here and looking at where the Assembly and the Senate would be, you can see here that on the first bullet that within the Assembly's one House bill, as they're going forward, they are proposing to restore $700 million to school aid beyond what the governor proposed, and that includes the elimination of the out-year building aid cuts. That's what we've been able to glean from looking and scanning through the budget bills from yesterday. So a lot, in one sense, in terms of what the Assembly wants to do, much of what I've been talking about here politically is moot in the sense that they don't want to see any of these changes made to building aid. Looking through the Senate's mock-up of the budget bill, they have not made any changes, as I can see right now, to the Senate bill or to the budget bill that affects what the governor had proposed to building aid. So, by and large, in a lot of things, that one of the things that they're talking about or are going to have to negotiate over is this issue of restoration of $700 million and where it would go, and whether or not they believe it would go back to eliminating the out year and the change from previous promises in the governor's proposal for projects that would lose their voting, or they would lose their aid ratios if their project wasn't approved and was voted on prior to July 1st. So that's where the Assembly stands on it. The Senate, like I said, I didn't see anything as I looked through it today that demonstrated that they were going to be proposing anything that was different from the governor. So now it's going to be over the next 13 days before we have a deadline to figure out, what specifically their proposals are. We expect them to talk about their proposals, particularly in the Senate, on building aid, and we're going to ask them to do it on all parts of AIDS. But it looks like that they're on the fence, as we can read the bill. But the Senate or the Assembly is not. That they are looking to eliminate basically everything I've just said over the course of the phone call, and then we come down to a discussion of what is future best for school building aids. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about what New York State ASBO is talking about for building aid in the future, to try to avoid some of these discussions that go forward on year in and year out building aid costs. We have on our website our testimony on the state budget, and one of the things that we talk about with building aid that we would like to see modified, so we don't have these ripsaw effects on districts and, frankly, on the state. That in one year there is a lot of building activity, and the second year there's little, and on the other hand that there's districts are being threatened by losing aid, and this whole process is to make capital construction in school districts an entitlement that provides the state and the local school district with a certain amount of funds that the state would they would look at the building condition surveys plus some other information that school districts would provide. The state would probably go out and want to do a little bit more investigation, but based on where districts stand, what their facilities look like, what their enrollments plan to be, what the necessities of the school district educational program would be, as to what the state would fund those districts at an annual basis over a certain number of years. That way a district would be able to, and that money from the state, this is again ASBO's proposal, that money would be then appropriated every year by the state legislature, would be put into an escrow account managed by the state controller, and then tapped into by local school districts when they wanted to actually engage in a capital project. That money could be used for maintenance, for minor projects, minor renovations, but it could also be used to accumulate for the state's portion of building new schools and doing some major renovations to the school districts. We feel this would be a a way that districts could maintain local control over what they felt they needed for their program, given what their communities wanted, but also but understanding that the state is going to tell you ahead of time what they can afford, and annually appropriate that money to school districts and let it build up over time. And it would kind of eliminate this whole process right now, is that projects that come in from districts to the state education department, and then suddenly Division of Budget recognizes, well, we had all this, we had a big building growth going on here, and now we have to pay for it beginning now. It would be a way that they could appropriate a consistent amount of money, and districts would know what's there. And the only thing that I think we need to make aware to in terms of how the whole thing would be put together is how much money and what the in a sense a negotiated criteria of what the building condition surveys and SCD they felt that was appropriate to be able to decide how much that districts were entitled to over a certain number of years, and we'd like to extend that out at least 5, possibly 10 years. So I wanted to give you an overview because there's only a couple of you, because I get calls about this all the time of what's going on with building aid. And the last slide is continued increased importance of the role of buildings and condition surveys. If we went to what I had projected or what I'm proposing, and we're getting some good feedback from the regions because we've been talking about this for a long time, is that would be the basis upon which we hope future building aid will be based upon, is an objective look at what the facilities are and what the needs of the school districts are. And right now, the only mechanism that districts have to provide that information, and the only mechanism that facilities planning, education department, and anybody else in the state has, is through the buildings and condition surveys mechanism. So we think that's going to be something that's that in terms of process, working with your maintenance staff would be to ensure that you keep those things up to date. Because either we're successful in changing to this idea of an entitlement program for school district building aid, and that you'd be able to bank money over time and use it and draw it down based on your own particular needs, whether it's for maintenance or other major projects, or that the state's will end up, which I don't think will happen based on what I've said, having a triage process. The only way that the state education department is going to be able to objectively do this, even if they would have enough staff to do it, is to look at what's submitted based on what, in terms of the projects that are submitted, based on what they have in their building and condition surveys, and try to match the two up and say, okay, well, this seems to be consistent with what they have, and make those decisions accordingly. So that's one of the final things I wanted to just say as part of the presentation, is that the building condition surveys are going to play a major part in going forward, regardless of whether we have a governor's proposal or a change really in how building aid is provided to school districts. So having all that been said, I know we have, again, the same 3 folks. We have Michelle, Patricia, and Richard on the phone, and I'd like to open it up and ask them, because I don't see, I'm looking through the comments here.
We have no questions in chat.
Yeah.
And if anyone has a question for Steve, please hit 7# on your phone.
Okay. Well, with a small group, it's very easy to call people out, which I normally wouldn't do. Michelle, do you have any questions or any concerns that you've got right now in terms of budgeting for facilities, or concerns about what what may be coming from state aid and pushback that you're getting from staff on some of these things, to be able to explain it to them? I know that through this series we're going to have more detailed. This was kind of the introduction. It was based on what I felt needed to be said, at least in terms of the politics of what are going on. But if you are so kind, Michelle, if you could, hit the *7 or either that, or comment on it, and let us know what your real concerns are right now, if you have any, with budgeting, or the proposal you see it, or what the positions I've talked about.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Michelle.
My district is actually at the end of a building project right now.
Yeah.
Are you anticipating, or have you ever seen anything that indicates to you that there may be some changes to the way projects that have already been approved are being funded, or?
No, there's really nothing in the budget that affects any out year payments of, because you basically, if you already completed something, the aid you're getting is paying off debt service. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. No, they've proposed nothing that would impact projects that have been completed and going forward. So as they would come offline, it would happen the same way that you would always expect them to happen. I mean, the issues that are going to really happen are going to be for those projects that have already been scheduled to be voted on, or that they would be subjected to this ranking pool, and that's for things that would be coming on board. But if you're already, you've had capital projects and you're receiving aid based on what you've been told by the education department, and it's really funding your debt service in combination with any capital that you're using. There's nothing that would affect that.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, barring any unforeseen emergencies, I'm hoping that we're not going to have to be budgeting for projects anytime soon.
Well, the interesting thing that you say about that, though, is that well, two things really. One is the emergency projects would not be affected by what either the governor's proposal or any current or legislation that's already out there. Is that if you have an emergency situation that happens where the timing, if God forbid something happened in Japan, where we had some kind of geographical or geological problem here, or walls fell down for one reason or another, that wouldn't be affected by the ability to get emergency aid that you've always been able to get. But so there's nothing that would change that. It's really just looking at what the submissions would be on a regular basis and prioritizing those things going forward. So, but but you don't have anything right now that you're looking at that would so you don't have a project that you're going to be voting on between now and July?
No, we do not.
Okay.
So I guess that makes us lucky.
Well, in a sense it does, because there are dozens of them that do. And they're the ones that we've asked them for their numbers and asked them to explain, how this is, patently unfair to change the horses in midstream on some of this stuff. But as far as projects that have already been underway, and also what I should say that one of the things that when we proposed this idea of an entitlement program where you don't that you would build up over time based on the assessment of your facilities and your assessment of student enrollment and the academic programs that you'd be willing to provide. That any program that had already been put into place in any fashion whatsoever, even from basically when you get a project number, going forward, that districts should be exempt from any new regulations or any new funding process, because that's really when the planning process starts within the school district. So
that entitlement thing that you were just discussing, that would be on a district by district basis?
Absolutely. Yeah, that what we've suggested is providing a mechanism or an improved mechanism based on the building and condition survey process, that everyone would be able to be allotted a certain amount of state money based on what the projected needs of that district would be for capital. And here's what the state allocation is going to be on an annual basis, and then we would build in modifiers. That's our suggestion over time in case something happened, whether enrollments changed or programs changed or some emergency changed. But that districts would be able to look at and say, okay, here's the amount of money that the state is committed to that school district over time, and then that instead of applying and saying, okay, well, we want to do this project, and now we'd have to go through and find out what our state aid would be and what the ratio would be. All that would be built in ahead of time.
Right.
So basically, you would know what money's building up from the state over time, rather than and be subject to it at any given point in time, right, as to what it might be. And the reason that we've suggested that to the legislature is because that it helps solve the planning process on both sides. Because the state's been complaining to us is like, well, we put this 10% incentive in place, and now suddenly, building a jump by $350 million. Right. It's like, well, what did you expect to happen?
Right.
But on the other hand, there were several districts that were still not able to pass bond votes and couldn't get anything built, and it was like, well, it didn't help us. But there was never any mechanism to allow for those districts to be able to receive any confirmation or any assurance from the state that they would, that anything that they would do in the future, that their facilities are in need of improvement, and that actually, in fact, that state money would be there, and you could build that up over time to a point where you could actually convince your voters that, we have this money going forward. It's this fits and starts kind of process that has created the roller coaster ride for districts. And the competitive piece of this would compound it, because you'd never, even if you thought you were in tier 2, it's like, okay, there's 10 more districts in tier 1, and that's so that's something that we believe the assembly will be effective, and that's going to go away. And that's what we believe that, as just glancing at the one-house budgets, is going to be out of there. But the idea that, you can be able to, put these things in reserve, or the state would do it in an escrow account that they couldn't touch, that the district would be able to plan, say, okay, we know exactly how much money, because it's there, right, is kind of what we're looking at.
Well, it certainly seems to me like that would provide more transparency, and going back to what you said about integrity for the voters.
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing that as business officials that we and the organization for business officials tries to point out is that what the proposals you're talking about goes against integrity and trust, because we can go out and say, okay, well, based on current law, here is, we've gotten our our square footage approvals, and here's what's going to be aided, and here's what the proposal is going to cost the local taxpayer. And then, oh, well, by the way, we didn't get aid on it, so now it's going to cost you more money. It's basically putting, to having district now to explain the fact that, well, it wasn't us, it was them, is something that is a hard sell for local school districts, particularly in this environment. So we're trying to look for solutions that are not, an easy way to blame the local school district if they have to change something.
Right.
Because if they change things the way they're changing it now, I can't see any other way. And this is what we've been saying. I can't think of any other way. But going out to your, explaining it in clear, hard facts. Here's what the process was. The board probably understands it, but the public might not. And then the next time you try to say, okay, well, now it's increased to this amount, and say, well, you know what, you had this planned all along. You never thought we were going to do this at this point in time, and you never told us, the fact, what you thought it was going to cost. So from the standpoint of the districts and integrity, but also it's like, here's what the districts, or here's what the state really wants to do is control their costs. Just tell us how much you're going to spend. If you're going to put $200 million into this capital construction, and here's the based on objective criteria, here's what districts, what money is going to be actually put into their accounts, monitored by the controller. Then you have that, it's there, and you can decide to do it now. You can decide to use some of it for maintenance, because that's one of the big things that has been lost in all this is, and I know that our folks and colleagues in the Building Grounds Association lament every year the fact that when minor maintenance repair got folded in, it got lost, so that there's no direct stream for maintenance. But the district could look at this pot of money and say that we're going to dedicate a certain amount based on the expertise of our staff, from the business office on down to the custodial staff, to say, here's, if we want to make this last, here's what we do, and we're going to use some of this, and it gives, again, local control plus control of public integrity on the part of the school district, plus the state can basically predict and say, here's how much you're going to get year to year, and that's the kind of thing we're talking about. So, well, Michelle, I appreciate you chiming in here. I kind of called you out, but
well, that's okay. Thank you.
But I want to kind of get as much here since we've only got a couple people, and I'm going to move on now to Patricia.
Patricia, go ahead and hit 7 pound on your phone to speak with Steve. Go ahead, Patricia.
Are you there?
I'm here.
We did have a project that was just approved March 8th, and we're waiting to see what's going to happen with all of this stuff.
What have you been hearing?
Nothing.
Nothing. Well,
we're going under the assumption that they'll never go back retroactively. That the earliest they could go back is April 1st, because that's when the budget date is.
Yeah.
So that's what we're hoping for, but I think what will happen is if it doesn't go that way, we'll scale back the project.
How much? What's the? How much would you be scaling back the project? That's planned for the vote.
Probably at least $1 million, probably $1.5 million. It's a small project. It's a maintenance work, but that extra 10% plus money we had in the capital reserve fund allowed us to go out with a project that would have zero impact to the taxpayer. So
right.
We certainly, promised them a 0% tax impact. So we would scale back the project to till it got to the point where the taxpayers would not be on the line for any further funds.
So if nothing happened and the governor's proposal got put into place, that would be your approach to it, is basically to scale the project back so that the district kept its promises in terms of no local tax impact.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I think that
we can't afford to lose the trust of the taxpayers.
Well, and I think that that's the thing we've been trying to talk about the most, at least from a central point here, is that's the goal that districts have, and particularly when you start looking at some of the other things that are kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about here, but property tax caps and other things, that it's going to be a battle between who do you trust.
Right. We rely on them each May, so we want to make sure that we keep their trust.
So that's what you plan to do, and you've communicated this to your local folks, your local legislators, and said, here's what's going to happen, and they've basically given you a nod or a shoulder shrug or something that didn't provide with any understanding that they knew the fact that you're going to be talking about this, or that this is going to impact your project.
I'm not so sure. The superintendent's the person who
has been doing that kind of stuff, yeah.
Right, and I'm not so sure the project has been of the utmost concern. Our concern is the amount of aid that we've been losing. So when we've been talking to our legislatures, it's been more about the aid takebacks. Yeah,
it's a combination of freezes and the GEA probably for you. Yeah,
right.
And that's understandable. But you've had this thing in that you are an example of one of those districts, and there's about 100 of them out there that have been caught in this timing issue, based on the governor put something into effect that if you pass his budget, it's going to be in effect based on February 1, and that it becomes it forces the districts into making choices. And your choice that you've been told me is that we'll just scale the project back, rather than saying, well, this is what we need to do, and that now it's going to cost you more money.
Right.
Because capital is, even if we do end up with a property tax cap, that's the one piece that is going to be exempted from it, is the capital project piece. And if these things are passed by the public before what the implementation date would be in 2012 and 13, you still be able to levy what you need to levy for that.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think most districts are probably doing what you're doing, and that's the anecdotal information that's provided to me about this. And that's not a good thing either, because you probably need to do the whole project. You wouldn't have put that in place. You wouldn't have spent all the time that you did and the work with the architects to figure out exactly what's necessary. And the only saving grace I can have is that, based on what I can see from the One House budgets, is that the Assembly is looking to eliminate all that stuff and those out in that and moving those dates at least until, for both of them, for projects approved on or after July 1, 2011, so that it would provide a district like yours with that extra, the ability to be aided on what you initially proposed to your taxpayers.
Correct.
When you went out.
That would be good. And I know we worked very hard over the years to build up a capital reserve just for this purpose, so that we could go out with something with a zero tax impact. So.
Well, the thing with is we try to parse some of these things out between what's among formula aids, about what's part of entitlement aids, and what's part of expenditure-based aids, which building aid obviously is one of the latter, is to try to and it was part of one of my. I hope I explained it well enough when I was talking about one of the slides, is that over time that most legislatures have been understood that changing expenditure-based aids based on commitments that districts have made, either through voter approval or for actual expenditures such as BOCES and others, that's not something that you want us to start hammering you after the year after you do that stuff. It's all, that we understand the state's circumstances. We understand the ability that you want to have to be predictable, but you have to be able to allow districts to go through a planning process of at least 2 years on all this stuff. And I think we've got an year on the Assembly, and we're still trying to work our way through what the bill says on the Senate. But I think you're on the same boat that a lot of districts, those 100 districts are, is they're just going to scale back the projects. And what we're going to want to do is talk to you and others saying, well, you did this, if in fact it happens, which we don't think and hope it won't. What was the impact on the kids? And
right.
try to accumulate that information to say, this was a plan. This was done, with a lot of public input, a lot of people talking about this stuff. Money spent already by the district to figure out what we need to do here, and we didn't do it.
Right.
And it wasn't because the voters were going to vote it down. They felt we needed to do it, but just because the state wouldn't, reneged on what their previous law promises had been.
And I know our board already has a priority list, and from that priority list, we'll just start, whacking away at.
Yeah, and that's how you'll get to you'll get to the number that meets the zero local tax impact.
Correct.
That's not the that's not the way that the state should be forcing districts into this kind of thing.
Right.
If you want to tell them later on, and that's the whole point of my advocacy part of this, is that if you want to tell them later on, this is what you need to do, and that give a window of where these things are going to be scaled down, so you can be honest and have integrity with your public about what you can and can't do. And then if that creates problems for districts, then we have an entirely different discussion to have with our public.
Right.
So, well, I want to say Patricia because that's what pops up. I don't know if you call it Pat.
Okay.
Or Pat's okay.
Pat.
All right. Well, thank you very much for chiming in and kind of giving your circumstances. And Richard from Buffalo, you're the last one who's on my list here. If you want to chime in and talk about a little bit of this stuff, and I know that Buffalo, compared to some of the districts we've been talking about, is worlds away from what you're trying to do. But I'll be more than happy to either talk about it, share again some of the comments that we've had, or convey some of the things that you want to be conveyed through this association on forward.
Richard, go ahead and hit 7 pound on your phone now. Go ahead, Richard.
Sure, we are a little different, and perhaps I'm a little different as well. We're a pretty heavily bureaucratized district, and one of the reasons I'm here is that I'm not in that close contact with plant services.
Okay.
And primarily the way that I interact with them is that we're checking on compliance with 5-year construction plans as we change the programs at various buildings to accommodate staffing needs and closings and things like that.
How many? Let me just ask you this question, if you don't mind,
Sure.
just for the benefit of the couple of people that have called in. How many actual schools does exist in the Buffalo City School District?
We've got roughly 60, and then as far as how many buildings we've got, we're well above that.
Yeah.
I think we're between 80 and 100.
Okay. So yeah, you're outside of New York City. You have the facilities needs really take on a whole different ballgame for you folks. But you still are subject to having voter approvals, are you not? And you're also subjected to the State Education Department for getting those approvals, and you might have some different negotiating strategies unions that some others don't, with PLAs and some other things. But you still have to, deal with, with what the state tells you they're going to get, and having to figure out projects and trying to figure out what the impact is going to be. Is that correct?
That's certainly correct. I think the approval process is a little different for voter approval. That is,
okay.
Being a dependent school district, but
right, you have to go through the city. You have to go through where the city council and there have been other layers there that the control board and all that stuff, right?
That we could actually get the bonds that we needed to do the enormous construction work we've done in the past 10 years or so.
I'm asking as many questions as you are, but I would like to get a feeling, if you don't mind, just to spend a couple of seconds, because I think it would benefit everybody, or the other couple of folks who are listening in here, is as far as the federal government incentives for some of the bonding opportunities that were there. Did that ever meet with your criteria in Buffalo? To think about taking advantage of any of those kind of things?
The incentives?
Yeah.
Sure, I think we got ourselves up to, we've got some incredible ratio. I mean,
did you?
It started out at 93, and I think with incentives it might have gone up to 98 somehow.
And this was essentially was through the fiscal stimulus money that was provided, and being able to do construction and things related to QZAB bonds and other things that helped you out. So you actually did do a considerable amount of work based on that. That's correct.
I think part of our difficulty initially was that the city had it had some sort of a debt limit that it couldn't reach.
Right. Yeah. The city's debt limit. Right.
From other places.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, most school districts don't have those debt limits that the cities do, and that's an anachronistic kind of thing that.
We specialize in that.
Yeah, you do. Elmira is one of the other districts that we every year we were trying to work to raise that debt similar, and I'm sure you're working with Georgia Shudo and the Big Five to try to work on that. But as far as what the proposal that you have and how it's impacting what you're planning to do right now, and what your plans are for the future, is what kind of impact is this having on Buffalo?
The governor's proposal.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not sure, honestly.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. Well, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just saying that if I know that there are other approval mechanisms out, as far as how you don't directly go to a local school board, but you do have approval processes to pass these things through, as a dependent district on the city, but you also still have to go through state education department to get projects approved, and I think that this is something that. You may be one of the districts that have more need and wasn't able to take advantage of some of the building aid incentives that took place, that were implemented before.
Right.
So that's kind of the dichotomy that took place, is that, and I can't speak specifically to, you have 100 buildings and that kind of thing around the city, but that 10% wasn't something you could actually get approved, even though other districts could get approved projects without the incentive and basically double built and burned up a lot of the state money on that. That's just one of the things that I wanted to talk about here. We've got a series of things now. I just wanted to kick it off with what's going on and what the climate looked like, and then next time bring in some discussion of within your own facilities departments what you might be looking at and some of the benchmarking things that you would be doing. because I think that that's one of the areas, notwithstanding building aid, but just in terms of staffing levels, that we'll talk about during our next session, is what are the benchmarks and what are the reports that the business officials should be looking at to decide, within our budgets, are we on target, or we need to be flexible on some things. So if anybody wants to jump back in here or ask any other questions about the session, about this conversation, we can do that. Or if there are other ideas or other questions that you want to have answered going forward, please feel free to write back in if it's easier, or you want to jump back in with a call. We'll give a couple minutes to do that and see how people feel about it.
Any other questions or comments? Please hit 7# on your phone.
Well, hearing nothing, as far as any additional comments or suggestions, I will thank you all for your participation this afternoon. It's easy to thank you all by name with this group. Thank you to, I can get my screen to show up. Okay, thank you to Michelle, Pat, and Richard for their time this afternoon. We hope that the conversation that we had talking about the situation with capital construction, what is going on, what might happen, what we're doing, and what we expect to see very shortly about this was helpful, as well as when you're asking some of your questions about this, that it was helpful for you this afternoon. So my thanks to all of you. My thanks to Matt for helping us out here this afternoon. And I wish you all the best. And if you have any other comments on the survey, please share them. And if you have any other follow-up issues you'd like us to talk about, please don't hesitate to let us know. So wishing you a good Monday and a good rest of the week. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
That now concludes the webinar. Thank you for attending. Have a great day and the rest of your week.